Hi, friends. Welcome to Raising Lifelong Learners. I'm your host, Colleen Kessler, and this is the podcast where I encourage you to trust yourself and your differently wired kiddos as you help cultivate their curiosity, encourage them to discover the world around them, embrace who they are wired to be, all while helping them discover their passions, interests, and raise them to become the amazing adults they're meant to be. Hey, welcome back. This is episode 226. Today I'm talking with Julie Skolnick. Julie is the founder of With Understanding Comes Calm, a website with resources related to gifted and twice exceptional kids and adults. She guides parents of kids who are gifted and distractible and mentors twice exceptional adults. She trains educators and works with professionals on how to bring out the best and raise self-confidence in their 2E students and clients. She's a prolific writer, she's a wonderful speaker, and she's a passionate advocate for the needs of gifted and twice exceptional kiddos. Her brand new book that was published in October is Gifted and Distractible. It is a wonderful, wonderful book, all about understanding, supporting, and advocating for your twice exceptional child. What I love about it, and we'll talk about it in this episode, is that it is full of resources and strategies you can use today to help support your kiddo. So, before we get started, I want to do a quick shout out to our sponsor for this episode, CTC Math. We're so grateful for their support. Check them out at ctcmath.com. Now, pop your earbuds in, go for a walk, take some time to just absorb this episode. We had so many great little nuggets in there, and I know you're going to get something out of it that you can use right now with your kiddos. All right, let's get on with today's episode. I am so excited to be here on the podcast with somebody that I've known like virtually for years and years, but we've never had a chance to sit down and talk. So this is really fun for me. Julie Skolnick from With Understanding Comes Calm is here to talk about all sorts of things gifted in 2E, but most especially her new book. Welcome to the podcast, Julie.
Thank you, Colleen. I'm so excited to be here. I'm kind of fangirling.
Well, it's a mutual fangirling, so that works out. Why don't you take a second and tell listeners about you in case they haven't come across your site, which is just, first of all, a treasure trove of resources for parents who are homeschooling or just parenting in general, gifted and 2E kids. But if they haven't heard of you yet, let's give them kind of a brief introduction.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I tell people to pack snacks when they go to my website. You can be there for days. So withunderstandingcomescalm.com is the site, and that's my service through which I guide what I call parents of gifted and distractible kids. And I mentor actually 2E adults. And I train teachers and work with clinicians all on how to bring out the best and raise self-confidence in 2E humans. So that's kind of like the big high level mission. And then there's like a gazillion things that happen With Understanding Comes Calm, including a monthly blog and newsletter, free newsletter called Gifted and Distractible, and online and on-demand conferences and memberships and lots of stuff, interviews, lots of podcasts that you can find on the website to learn more. And you can actually search under terms that are interesting to you. So pretty much if it's twice exceptional, gifted, and a learning difference, it's me.
I love that. And I love that your resources work for or talk about both the kids and the adults, because as we know, when we work with this whole population of individuals, apples don't fall far from trees. And so often parents of gifted and 2E kids start to discover things about themselves that either they did or didn't know and understand when they were kids. And so the fact that you offer both the mentoring for parents and then the resources or for adults and then the resources for parents who are raising kids like that is just so wonderful.
And it all kind of happened. I hung out my shingle, so to speak, about 10 years ago, and it really was to support parents. And then I started receiving emails from adults saying, "Oh my God, I'm reading your blog. And like, how do you know me? And can you help me?" So I created a service for adults, very specific, to take them through for really professional and personal fulfillment, and then schools and districts and started to reach out about teachers. So it all made sense. And also I have that disease, probably like you, where you can't say no to people. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and there's so much that comes up, especially when you start talking to and working with people who are struggling and have not recognized themselves in books or magazines or newsletters or websites before, and they feel there's that cathartic feeling, right? Like I'm understood, I'm not
Oh,
weird or bad or
100%.
broken. And so naturally you want to help as much as you can. So I just love that. Did I read that you have two kids of your own too? So you're kind of like coming
I
from
do.
both the professional and the personal perspective like me?
Yes, I have three awesome, very different, and in some ways very similar 2E kids, 22, 20, and 14. Yeah.
I love that. And I think it's so important when we're working with people to see if we can find those professionals who understand both sides of it, right? The professional as well as the personal. I remember the psychologist that was like the best fit for my kids when they were young was the one who had 2 kids at home. So she dove deeper into that understanding and then was able to serve my kids well. Tell me a little bit about where with understanding comes calm comes from, that idea and the
Mm.
title of everything you do, because I know that it's rooted in what we need to do as parents.
Yeah, I love that you asked that question, Colleen. Thank you. So I actually have a vivid memory of when I said that phrase, with understanding comes calm. So my middle guy, when he was little, I we were just struggling, and I finally decided to pivot from that deficit focus, I need to fix you. This was before I knew anything and was just doing the thing that parents do, which is trying to put out fires and play whack-a-mole and, whatever we can figure out at the moment. And I finally paused and I just kind of dug in deeply. And this is, one of my tenets is that behavior is communication,
Mhm.
and not to really focus so much on the behavior, but to focus on the trigger or what underlies the behavior. And I think this was like maybe one of the first times I actually did that. And I stopped and I dug into like what was actually going on for my kid, not what was my kid doing that was affecting me in this negative way. And then I was unpacking this with a friend who became a colleague. And I said to her, with understanding comes calm. Like how many times do your kids not feel understood? How many times do you as a parent not feel understood? Right. And so all of a sudden, when you can understand, and it's multiple layers, because there's the self understanding, there's the feeling understood by others, and then there's the understanding others perspective that happens. So when you get that trifecta, it's enormous. But even just one of those three things, that understanding, really does calm the situation down. And really my goal, my overall, right, like magic wand moment is that 2E humans everywhere will not just understand themselves, not just have self-confidence, but actually they'll have self-love. That's really my lofty goal, is for self-love. And you can't have self-love if you don't understand yourself, you don't feel like you're understood, or you don't understand others.
I love that. I love that self love and understanding yourself so you can then, right, communicate and advocate for your needs and
Exactly.
build your relationships and your connectedness with others. Let's talk a
Exactly.
little bit about that. In your book, so Julie has a brand new book, Gifted and Distractible. And I love, love, love one of the things that you say in the introduction to the book when you're talking to readers about how they can use it, the idea of it being very actionable and very strategy oriented. And when you buy the book, listeners, because you should, that the Julie talks about sitting in parenting talks like we all have. And I know I speak at homeschool conventions quite often, and I have so many families that come up to me after my talks or after other people's talks asking me, like, who should I go see at this convention? Because I feel like I'm sitting in either a sales pitch or just story after story after story with nothing that I can take away and use. And so I always try to be very actionable. So somebody sitting in an hour talk can leave today and go do something tomorrow. And you talk about that in your introduction. So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about where that came from and the idea of, or how your book is structured really, so we can use it with our kids.
Okay. So, and that's a lot of really awesome. There's a lot to say, and I'm going to be really concise. What you're referring to is in the introduction, I talk about how I used to go to all these. Remember when I was just giving you the anecdote about my son, and I was like, I knew nothing at that time, right? How did I learn? Well, some of the ways that I learned was attending conferences, whether they were special education conferences or they were by and large gifted conferences, lots of ADHD conferences. And like you said, 10 minutes before the talk was over, the speaker would inevitably look at their watch and go, "Oh, shoot, 10 more minutes. Let me give you a strategy." And I was like tapping my foot for the first 40 minutes going, "What strategy?" So I made a promise to myself, to my listeners, to my clients that I would always do a 40-60, 40% of theory or understanding and 60% of actionable strategies. So the book is 200 pages of strategies. I counted, which actually came out to 60%, which was awesome. And the book, then to answer your other question, Colleen, the book is structured in 3 parts and it mirrors what I call the cycle for success. So my cycle for success has sort of 3 stops, right? The first one is understanding, this deep understanding of not just what does twice exceptional mean, but what does gifted mean, which I talk about it being quite misunderstood out in the world. And then not just the overall like foundation of what is gifted and distractible, but how about who's this kid in front of you? So that first part of the book talks about gifted, twice exceptional, and then chapter 4 is all about certain learning differences, certainly not all learning differences.
Right.
And then the second stop on that cycle for success is strategies. What are the strategies? And I love to teach and I love to, and I'm a visual learner and I love hacks for learning, acronyms. And so everything I teach sort of has a way to remember it. And so I have 6 categories of strategies that I talk about in the strategy section, and they follow the 6 letters of an acronym, and the acronym is PRAISE. So the 6 categories are personal connection. How do we do that when a child is challenging, whether it's as a parent, they're challenging, as a clinician, they're challenging, as a teacher, they're challenging, as a homeschooler, so personal connection, reframe. How do we reframe from a deficit focus to a strength-based approach? Anticipate. You are the expert on your kid. You know so much right now, but hope springs eternal. So you're going to just keep trying the strategies that you tried yesterday and they won't work tomorrow. So let's use what we know and change it up. Incentives and choices, sense of humor, and exercise. So that's the strategy section. And then the last section and the third stop on that cycle for success is advocacy. How do we advocate on behalf of a complicated kid when we feel emotional ourselves, when we feel misunderstood ourselves as the parents, and our kids are also feeling all those feelings?
I love the way that that's all pulled together in a really easy to understand nutshell. And I said this for those of you listening, when Julie and I first started talking before we started recording, we realized how much we actually have in common, and that I really resonate with a couple of the things that you say there. Obviously, because we were talking about it earlier, the strength-based versus the deficit-based approach. We so often fall into the idea that we have to fix our kids instead of meeting them where they are and capitalizing on their strengths and moving them forward. And then that idea of you're the best parent for your kid. And then as a homeschooler, and the experience that I've had for so many years now, talking to thousands of homeschoolers around the country and the world, actually, that you're the best teacher for your kids too, which means if your kids go to a traditional school, then you're the best advocate to make sure that they get the teaching that they need. So let's talk a little bit about that, if you will, that idea, because it is an overarching theme in your book and in stuff that we talk about here all the time, that idea of focusing on their strengths and using those and helping to shore up their weaknesses or help them be more resilient or more confident through those strengths, so that then we can advocate for them in whatever situation we need to, and then they can advocate for themselves.
So I'm going to take an example, which is pretty prevalent, of dysgraphia and written expression disorder. Okay. So, which are 2 different things. A lot of people conflate them, but dysgraphia is really the mechanics of writing and has to do with some executive functioning. And then written expression disorder is really executive functioning, getting all those gazillions of gorgeous thoughts from your head actually onto paper in a logically flowing paragraph or paper. So when that is the deficit or a challenge that a child has, wisdom, let's say, says you need to write in order to learn to write. So I will respectfully disagree with that because it's not really the writing is the challenge, but it's the organizing of the thoughts that is the challenge. So let's say you have a kid who's an incredible artist. Well, instead of saying, here's your paper and let's work through this web or whatever strategy that we're typically going to use in a classroom or sometimes in homeschooling as well. Instead, let's draw out. Let's draw your thoughts. Like show make like and then let me ask questions like, well, I'm wondering about this part of this drawing and to get more detail in that way. Or we might hear from some teachers that, you know what, the PowerPoint part, which is like the fun part of the writing assignment, you can't do until you write the thing. No, 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 no. Do the PowerPoint. That's how you can move slides around and actually organize your executive functioning and your thoughts, right? If you are a charismatic speaker or a singer or whatever your strength and passion is, the child's strength, that's what they should use to express what they're thinking. Because really, what we're trying to do is help them organize their thoughts that they can then write. And if they can't write mechanically, dysgraphically, then there's a scribe or a speech to text or whatever that eventually happens. So that's just an example of using a passion. Here's another example, executive functioning. Everybody in gifted land and twice exceptional land is like, my kid's executive functioning stinks, right? I once went to a conference and I actually quote him in the book, Bill Dickerman, who has passed away, unfortunately, but phenomenal advocate and teacher for TUI kids. And I went to one of his talks. I think it might have been my first SANG conference, Supporting the Emotional Needs of the Gifted. And the title of his talk was, if your child has executive functioning deficit, you're the luckiest person in the world. Oh my God. Talk about a reframe, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, Bill, what are you talking about? How can that be like the luckiest thing? And he said, people who have a executive functioning challenges are often people who can just see so much more than the neurotypical person. They are crunching so much more data. Do you want the doctor who's going to be like, yeah, looks like you've got the same old thing I see or do you want the doctor who's going to be like, there's a little something different here. Let me take a look, or the lawyer. So if you have that executive functioning deficits, oftentimes part of that is because you're crunching way more data, noticing way more things. So if that's the case, if your child absolutely loves their music and is listening to however kids are listening to music these days, and they've organized their playlist, guess what? That's executive functioning. Ask them questions about it. How did you choose which songs to put in this playlist? How did you pick which one comes first? They probably have a way that they did that. And that might be a nice little entree to say, it seems to me you were looking at the genre of that music, or you were looking at the tempo of that music, or the mood that made you feel like. You're organizing in those ways. Guess what? A paragraph, same deal. You got to just think about how the logical flow of the conversation for the listener or the reader. And so those are ways to use. I mean, there's a zillion ways to use passions, depending on what the passion is, to learn the thing that's really hard.
Okay, you have heard me talk for the last year and a half about CTC Math. The reason I keep talking about it is that they really are a fabulous choice for homeschool math. We are customers. I have been using CTC Math for several years. I pay for my own subscription and am an incredibly happy customer and consumer of the program. My youngest two use CTC, and it's perfect for both of their very different math experiences. One of my kids is a math go-getter and is a year ahead in math and prides himself on the fact that he can speed through it and do extra lessons to get ahead. We have all of the grade levels from kindergarten all the way to calculus at our fingertips, so he can progress as quickly as he wants to progress, and he loves it. My other one sometimes takes 2 or 3 tries at a lesson because some concepts click pretty quickly and some concepts don't. And she has the flexibility to approach math in any way she needs to. The best part too is the folks at CTC Math are so helpful. They want you to succeed. There was one time where we just could not understand what they were saying and how it was going and how it needed to be explained. And we watched a couple of videos on YouTube, and just as a last-ditch effort, I emailed the support team there and I said, look, I am having so much trouble explaining this to my kiddo. Can you just break it down for me in another way? And they did. They want you to be successful. In fact, CTC Math is so convinced they can help you and your kiddo be successful that they have a lifetime money-back guarantee. Like, what company does that? They want you to be satisfied. They want your kid to learn. That is incredible, and that is a company I want to support. So check them out at ctcmath.com or go over to the show notes for this episode and click on the link. Let them know I sent you. Ask them questions. They are there to support you. ctcmath.com. CTC is the best, filled with the best people. All right, let's get back to today's episode. I love that. And I want to piggyback on that a little bit because it's so important for us as parents to remember that there's no one way, one path to success. I remember when my third, she's kind of my alphabet soup. She is like the quintessential 2E kid. If I needed one to use as a model that, I was given her. So I had all sorts of resources to draw from. In fact, she's very forthcoming. She's been to conventions and conferences with me and talked to parents, and once said to me, I like coming because I know those moms feel better when they talk to me because they know their kids aren't the only ones who struggle. And so she's very self-aware, but that's because we've done a lot of work. And I remember when she was, 5 or 6, she was at an occupational therapist who didn't know anything about 2E. And at that time, we didn't really know that Logan was gifted too. We still don't have an identification on her because we don't need to right now. We're homeschooling. As far as giftedness goes, we have other IDs and diagnoses with her. But her OT was working with her on some of the sensory seeking behaviors because she has sensory processing disorder. And there was no way that the OT could give her enough input. And she just kept scratching her head because she presented like a classic SPD kid, but nothing she gave her and none of the protocols we did were enough. She always needed more and always needed more. And so I said, she's really creative, really imaginative, very visual and artistic. And we suspect that she's twice exceptional. And so this OT, bless her heart, went and read about 2E kids and tried to figure some different things out, and then started giving her cognitive challenges on top of the physical ones. So when she'd climb the rock wall to get the bean bags, her OT would challenge her to do it in rainbow and then reverse rainbow order or count backwards.
Brilliant. Love it.
And she just exploded with leaps and bounds because we forget or don't know, because how often do we not know, or do the professionals in our life not understand, gifted in 2E, that those kids need to tap into both. And if we tap into what their brains want to be driven towards, the imaginative or whatever, then it can help that other area.
I think of it sometimes as every once in a while, I'll hear from a parent or a teacher like, oh, the kid's doodling and they're not paying attention. And I'm like, actually, they're doodling so they can pay attention. So the way I think of it is, this is so not scientific, guys. This is just Julie's brain on, giftedness is we have to engage. So there's parts of the brain that are stronger, right? Those passions, those areas, the things that they love to do, that they can hyper focus. And you're like, why can you focus so well on this? But oh my God, brush your teeth for God's sakes, right? You have to actually engage that on fire part of the brain. So the other part of the brain is like, oh, here I am, and like has a chance to shine. And so you have to actually engage that other bigger part, brighter part, passionate part so that the other parts can get online as well. So she was able to do all the stuff she was expected to do, your daughter, because that other part was like going, wait, what's rainbow backwards? Wait, what's the rainbow again? That's brilliant. That's so great that OT was able to do that. Actually, yesterday I was speaking with a professional working with a client's child who's on the autism spectrum. And she's like, my interventions are just not working. And I'm like, well, first of all, you got to give context. This child needs to know why. That's so important.
Yes.
Our kids need to know why. So it's really looking at what you're talking about, Colleen, is that whole child in front of you and what are the things that they need so that their entire self is considered. Susan Baum talks about this as the yellow part of being gifted and the blue part of being the LD part. And you can't look at blue or yellow. You have to look at green.
Yeah, that's a great visual for parents. So let's shift it into some of that practical, although we have been practical with these anecdotes, but let's talk about the parent who, and I'm sure that these are parents that you work with, they're overwhelmed. They're frustrated because like me and like probably you when you were going from conference to conference and book to book, don't see their kids in a lot of the parenting books out there or the suggestions that are being given or the easy things to find right online. And they're trying to meet all those needs, right? They're trying to parent their kid. They're trying to figure out where those strengths are, where those talents are, where those interests and passions are so they can tap into them potentially. But then also, what is this? Is this dysgraphia? Is this, a processing issue? Is this an executive function challenge? And then putting those things together to be able to meet their kids where they are. What kinds of suggestions or advice would you give parents who are just trying to figure that out and get to the next step so they can help their kid?
So you're asking, how do you know which alphabet your kid is falling into?
Yeah, maybe not specific diagnoses, but if you've got this puzzle in front of you,
Yeah.
how do you even sift through that puzzle to get to the good stuff to be able to help, to be able to figure out reverse rainbow order or dictation software or whatever?
So the number one thing, I don't care if your kid is 2 years old or 22 years old, is to ask your kid, like,
Yep.
what do you love? What I like to say is, what makes you tick and what ticks you off? What are the things
That I
what
love that.
thank you. Yeah, I actually have a tick off chart I do with 2E adults. But so it's really important to listen. Take the time. Like, we all have this. Okay, so here's maybe I'm going. Okay, so actually, let me back up. There's like my brain just went inside. So first of all, getting your kid evaluated, I think, is really important. But you can't just get your kid evaluated by anybody if you have a twice exceptional kid, because they have to understand, like Colleen's OT understood, if I don't know this, I need to figure this out. So when you are interviewing neuropsychologists or getting referrals to neuropsychologists, I literally in the book have questions to ask, because you have to go with somebody who understands 2E. And guess what the first question is? The first question is, do you have 2E clients? And if the practitioner goes, what's 2E? Then we know, thank you so much, move on. But there's more detailed questions to ask. So first of all, we need to get an evaluation. Secondly, asking the child, like, we're so focused on what's hard. I have a goal every morning when I take my 14-year-old to school, and my goal is to make him laugh so hard that he gets the hiccups. That's my goal. I mean, I don't really want him to get the hiccups because they're uncomfortable, but I want him to laugh from the belly really hard. And so many parents will say to me on the way to school, I'm like rattling off a checklist. Don't forget this. Did you do this? After school, we have this. Do you know that this? Don't forget to see that teacher. Do you have your homework? Oh my gosh. If you're whether you're on your way to school because you're homeschooling and coming down the stairs or going to an enrichment class, whatever it is, still it's the same thing. Actually, even with parents, I actually tell them to change hats, to wear one hat, literally wear one hat when you're homeschooling, and either take it off or put a different hat on when you're mommying or daddying or parenting, because we have to make a difference between when we're professional or at work, at school, and when we are at home. And when we are at home, our job is to love the heck out of our kids. And loving the heck out of our kids means helping them to feel understood. And how do they feel understood? When they're listened to, when they're acknowledged, when we can use validation for their emotions without trying to fix or tell them what to do. So a lot of it is listening. A lot of it is asking a lot of questions. And a lot of it is just really hearing what your kid says and asking them to help you understand. And then a lot of it is actually leaning into what your kid loves to do, even if you hate it. Sorry for all the shows or video games or whatever. No, I have a whole chapter on structuring screen time in the book. If your kid loves their screen time, rather than pushing against it, we have to at least understand what it is they love and be with them in their passions. So I hope that kind of answered your question.
Yeah, no, it helps. And it actually validates a lot of what we already talk about on this podcast, that the connection trumps everything. And
Mhm.
you have to hear your kids because they need all kids, whether they're homeschooled or traditionally schooled. But especially 2E kids need a soft place to land. They need to know that no matter what's going on, you're there for them and
100%.
that you'll hear them and that you'll, advocate for them or teach them how to advocate for themselves. And so that 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 listening and validating and empathizing is so important. I have an anecdote or a suggestion in my Resilient Sons book that goes right along with what you were just saying about video games. So many of our boys, especially because that instant gratification, right, that follow through. When you think about, like, Minecraft is one that one of my kids is really into. It doesn't take long for a day to happen in Minecraft, so you have the follow through and the result of your efforts way more quickly than you do in real life. So there's that constant value and reiteration that's going on in that game. And I am not and never have been a video gamer. And so while I don't play it, I try and suggest, you sit with them and talk to them. I got an email from a reader not that long after the book was published, and she said that she had spent so much time pushing against video games. And after she read the book, she put down her laundry one day because that anecdote came to mind, or she was listening to it. I don't remember. And she went in and sat down with her son, her teenage son, and just asked him about what the game was that he was doing. And she said he kind of looked at her funny and then started talking about it. And she said that it's changed the way they talk to each other because he's coming to her to talk about the games, but then that bleeds into other things, right?
There's that portal. Yep.
Yep. It makes it easy for our kids to talk to us about other things because we meet them where they are. So it's such a powerful suggestion there.
Yeah, the hard things. So I call it the bucket of resilience. There are things that fill your bucket and things that empty your bucket. And when your bucket is empty as a child, as a parent, it's harder to do anything hard or anything at all. But when that bucket is full, harder things don't become as hard. And I think that's that talking to that child about his passion area helped to fill his bucket, as does validating, acknowledging, understanding, and building that personal connection. As you said, is the A1 number one. It's why praise starts with a P, is personal connection. And it's extraordinarily important. And it's important for a child who has negative experiences during the day to know that there's a safe space. We know that 2E kids are 40 times more redirected than neurotypical kids. Why won't you? Why can't you? Why don't you? When will you? That's sort of the song they hear every single day. And so if that's like the norm, being able to debunk that norm and have, as you said beautifully, a soft landing spot, that's so important to fill that bucket of resilience, and therefore to be able to approach them with things that are hard and teach them those lagging skills.
Yeah. You bring up that bucket, and I've been doing a lot of research for projects that I'm working on, and I was reading some of the Gallup stuff and the strength builders things from Donald Clifton and Tom Rath. And Tom Rath has that book, have you filled your bucket today, or whatever. I forget what the exact title is, but we'll link to it in the show notes. And there's a youth version that's really great that just talks about, pouring. You have more to give, and it's easier to get through when you filled your bucket with the things that interest you and light you up and make you love living, give you the whole purpose for living. And then when we as parents, like you said, Julie, validate them and meet them in their spaces, they're able to combat that negativity, because you're right, we're constantly correcting, or they're being constantly corrected, or they're the ones who the other parents are yelling at on the playground, or because they're that whole idea of, or the whole, I guess, like the 2E nutshell is, right, they're many ages all at the same time, so they don't behave like they look, or look like they behave, and
Yeah,
so it
that's
gets very
beautifully said.
confusing for them and others around them.
Right,
Well,
and the self redirection and the self negativity, that doesn't go away when 2E kids are all grown up. That actually becomes even more intense and is even harder to undo. So, yeah.
yeah, that self-talk, that metacognition, and thinking
Mhm.
about their own thinking, and the spirals, right? I remember being, actually, I was at a SANG conference and talking with a mentor of mine. My mentor in college for my master's was Jim Delisle, who's,
Uh,
super passionate about the social and emotional needs of gifted youth and adults. And we were talking about that, is there a gifted kid that's not 2E in some way?
oh,
Because,
I love Jim, and I
right?
love that you had that conversation because only save that in safe spaces. If asynchronous development is a defining characteristic of giftedness, which it is in my book, then
Yes.
aren't all gifted people 2E? So
Yeah.
Jim Delisle, Doing Poorly on Purpose, is his fabulous,
Oh,
fabulous, one of his fabulous books. But he was a mentor for my middle guy.
Oh, was he? He's
Yep.
such a great guy. He's such a brilliant advocate for gifted kids, and 2E kids in particular. And I was really fortunate because I studied under him at Kent, and because
Amazing.
I was fascinated by those same things with regards to the social and emotional needs, we created a whole nother course for me so that I could do independently, because that wasn't offered, and it wasn't, in the master's degree program.
He was
But
walking the walk.
yeah, it's so, it is important to remember that these kids, by their very nature, have so many really contradictory needs in so many cases. And so acknowledging that this isn't an easy walk, it isn't, you're not going to get a manual, but Julie's book has so many resources and strategies that you can use today to help your kids and meet them where they are, and teach them to learn to advocate for themselves and support themselves as they grow into adulthood and who they're meant to be, but also support you, so you're not alone, you're not crazy,
Yeah.
and you have tools at your disposal. So we're running out of time because I know you have somewhere to get to, and we want to make sure that we leave listeners with a little bit of a reason to go get your book, right? What is, before we go, what would be the one kind of takeaway? There's lots of takeaways in this, but what would be the one thing that maybe we didn't get to, or you really want parents to know when they stop listening to this episode and go look at their kid and want to help them get to be the best versions of themselves?
I love that question. So the last chapter is called A Day in the Life of Your 2E Child, and it literally goes through sort of all the micro stresses that can happen from the moment the child wakes up. And the point of that chapter is actually, you, parent, are the exact right parent for your child. Sometimes it doesn't feel that way. Oftentimes you feel like, oh my God, I have no idea what I'm doing. Where's the manual? Where's the course? Where's the book? How can I? But really, the truth is, as we talked about a little bit before, there's so much you know about your child, and there's so much you can work with if you stop listening to the noise around you, the naysayers, the judgers, the negativity, and you take a deep breath and you look at your kid and you recognize that their timeline is very different than a neurotypical kid. Not just their time blindness, but just they need to delve deeper into things. They need to understand the why behind things, and things come so quickly, bizarrely quickly, and other things bizarrely slowly. That's okay. It's all okay. And that's really the takeaway is this idea of self-love as a parent, so your kid can have self-love too.
Oh, I love that. That's perfect. Okay, so we will have links to Julie's book, her website, her resources, along with a graphic. I forgot to even talk about it, so we'll put it there. Julie sent me a graphic about emotional regulation, and it's fabulous. So we'll have that on the show notes. and links to other things that we've talked about, other books that were mentioned, other topics that were mentioned, and resources that support you in your journey of parenting and homeschooling gifted and twice exceptional kiddos. So check that out at raisinglifelonglearners.com/podcast. And we'll be back same time, same place next week with another episode about raising your gifted kids and your twice exceptional kids and your neurodivergent kids and loving them where they are. Julie, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Colleen. I'm so delighted to finally speak with you in person-ish.
Yeah, in person. It's been fun, and we've got to do this again because this was I think we could have gone off in a million different directions.
For sure.
All right, have a
Thank you, listeners, for being here and taking the time out of your busy day to listen to Colleen's amazing podcast. And this is really your effort on behalf of your family. So my hat is off to you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.